Welcome to MIHR's first annual webcast on hiring requirements for the Atlantic mining industry. So in this session, we'll begin with a brief introduction to MIHR, followed by an overview of the Canadian mining labour market and MIHR's national hiring requirements forecast. We'll then turn our attention to the needs in the Atlantic region and discuss the region's unique context, which will probably not come as a surprise to anyone any of the ones listening from the Atlantic region, that the region is faced with an aging workforce with high retirement rates and a young workforce that is highly mobile and finds employment in other provinces. So first, a little bit about us, who we are and what we do. Mining Industry Human Resources Council is the national HR council for the minerals and metals industry. We have hundreds of industry leaders who volunteer on our projects and guide the work that we do. Our key objective is to identify the national HR challenges and opportunities for the minerals and metals industry and create national solutions through collaboration and partnerships and synergies that we are a catalyst for in the sector. Our partners and collaborators include employers, both in mineral exploration, mining, and minerals processing, and quarrying and aggregate producer sector. We include national and provincial mining and exploration associations, national organized labor groups, federal, provincial, and territorial governments and government representatives, post-secondary education and technical institutions, and Aboriginal and other interest groups. For example, groups interested in youth or women in the sector. MIHR's strategic plan structures our priorities into three key areas: attraction, retention, and transition, skills learning and mobility, and research for industry sustainability. Under the pillar of attraction, retention, and transition, our key objectives are to develop and distribute tools and resources to enable employers to be more effective at attracting, retaining, and transitioning employees in the sector. There's particular focus in this area of work on underrepresented and diverse groups in the sector, such as Aboriginal people, New Canadians, women, and youth. One of the key areas of focus in this sector of MIHR is to aggressively promote mining as a career of choice. And to that end, we have a number of tools and resources under what we call our Explore for More brand. So the skills learning and mobility area of work, the key focus is to identify and support the development of tools and systems that are required to ensure appropriately skilled, effective, and mobile workforce. We developed and maintain an industry-led worker certification program and a training accreditation program that are based on national occupational standards that were developed and put in place with strong collaboration with the industry. The goal of this area is to bring together mining-related educational institutions to identify skills and learning challenges and share best practices, but also to ensure recognition of highly skilled workers in the sector. Just this past May, MIHR at the CIM conference certified the first ever Canadian underground miners, surface miners, and mineral process operators. It was a very exciting event, and we were very proud to be part of that. The third area of work at MIHR is research for industry sustainability, and that's the pillar of work that brings us together today. Under this objective, we research, analyze, forecast, and disseminate labor market, human resources, and other information relevant to the mining sector. We provide up-to-date information, analysis, and recommendations on different programs ongoing in the sector, and also allow you to benchmark your own practices against other practices in the sector. So more information about who we are and what we do can be found on our website at www.mihr.ca. And you can go in and look at the different program areas and find the different tools and programs that are important to the work that you're doing. Each year, under the Research for Industry Sustainability pillar, MIHR provides the industry with an overview of the Canadian mining labor market. And this next section of the webinar will provide you a summary of our most recent analysis from our 2011 report. Canada's mining industry is a global leader with a diverse commodity basket and a value of mineral production that's among the highest in the world. Mining accounts for roughly 3.5% of the nation's real GDP, and demand for commodities continues to stay high in developing countries. So the industry will face pressures as it strives to meet this demand in the future. So along with capital allocation and cost management, human resources challenges is amongst the largest issue facing the industry into the future. The recent economic global recession led to a drop in demand and prices for commodity, and this in turn led to operations in the Canadian mining industry slowing or suspending activities at over 30 sites, which then led to reduced overall employment in the sector. However, the economic growth has resumed and employment levels are back on the rise, but the economic uncertainty continues, and for that reason, we recommend taking a conservative approach when you're thinking about the forecasts that are presented to you today. It has been well established through MIHR research that there's a strong relationship between commodity prices in mining and employment. It's a strong positive relationship. So what you see here is a graph showing mining employment in Canada over the last 5 years. We overlay this with a demonstration of what Minerals Price Index has done over the last 5 years. It becomes clear that there is a very strong positive relationship, somewhat lagging, but still there. So when times are good, employment in the sector tends to be high, and when commodity prices are not doing as well, employment in the sector tends to drop with that. Layered on this relationship with the economic cycles in the industry are also a number of other key labor market trends. Probably the most prominent at the moment would be the aging workforce. So as the baby boom generation reaches retirement age over the next decade, Canada is going to reach a point where there are more people eligible to leave the labor force than to enter it. You layer into this a younger retirement age in the mining industry, and we face almost a bit of a perfect storm brewing in terms of retirement exits. And you'll see this illustrated in the forecast that we present to you today. So a lot of the work that we're doing here at MIHR is focused around helping the sector prepare for looming labor shortages. And ways that we do this are through increasing the attraction and retention of key talent groups, so including youth, women, new Canadians, and Aboriginal people as part of the mining workforce. So each year, MIHR produces a 10-year employment and hiring requirement outlook for the sector. And what I'll do now is walk you through our most recent one, released at the end of August this year, our 2011 National Forecast Report. The report provides an annual update of MIHR's national hiring requirements forecast. And the 2011 edition of the report incorporates small adjustments that were made in the forecasting approach and revises the forecast to account for current economic and demographic conditions in the sector. Key sections of the report that may be of interest to you are an introduction and economic overview, look at key mining labor market trends both currently and over the next 10 years, and a forecast of national hiring requirements that includes employment and replacement requirements due to churn in the sector and to retirement. We also provide forecasts for hiring requirements divided over 6 regions of the country, and include a discussion at the end of our forecast report on the key issues facing the mining labor market overall. The forecast methodology that we use in our hiring requirements forecasts is quite a sophisticated process, and a detailed discussion of it is included in the 2010 forecast report. So your 2011 report is an addendum to the 2010 report. So if you're interested in details on how we do this, you can find those in the 2010 national report. Our forecasts use a combination of independent economic forecasts, information from stakeholders, and mere research. And the model that we produce forecasts hiring requirements over 3 scenarios of mining employment over a 10-year period. Okay, so the chart that you're looking at here is showing you a little bit of the methodology and the rigor behind the forecasting work that we do. And just a 30,000-foot view of what's going on here. You'll see in orange inputs to our forecasting model, and in blue are the outputs from it. What we do is start with data collection from a number of different sources, from Statistics Canada data, NRCan data, data that we collect here in-house with our annual survey on HR issues, and other sources, and pull the data together and use it for modeling, development, and testing, where we look at a number of economic factors that are driving employment in the sector, and land on the model that best explains the variation in employment over time. We then use that to forecast what employment will do in mining over the next 10 years. Key areas that we focus on in our employment forecasts are, as I just showed you, commodity price movements and commodity price forecasts, given that they have such a strong connection to employment in the sector. Age distribution of the mining workforce, so that we can model retirement exits from the industry, and a baseline assumption about non-retirement separation rates in the sector. And we roll that all together and present you with national hiring requirements forecasts that we leave divided out into changes in employment, which you see in the left-hand column, and replacement requirements broken into retirement replacement requirements and non-retirement separation, so everything else that's not related to retirement. And then in the final right-hand column, pull it all together into a final forecast of hiring requirements for the sector. So you see here there are 3 scenarios that are modeled. The baseline scenario is the one that depicts the status quo, so if things go forward as they are now. We'd be projecting over the next 10 years a hiring requirement, an overall cumulative hiring requirement in the sector of over 112,000 workers. That's on the national picture. Also in this graph you can see a contractionary scenario and an expansionary scenario are modeled. The contractionary scenario assumes a contraction in the economic conditions in the sector, and in that case we would still be forecasting a need to replace 75,000 workers over the next 10 years. So you can see in terms of change in employment, we would predict that as commodity prices contract in the contractionary scenario, so too would employment in the sector. However, what's driving the replacement requirements here are the retirement separations. You can see a need to replace over 61,000 workers in Canada just due to retirement alone, just due to the aging workforce. In the expansionary scenario, we take on a rosy view of how things will be economically moving forward. And there again you can see as we're forecasting expansion or positive outcomes in commodity prices, we are also forecasting an increase in employment. You add that to the replacement requirements in the sector of over 71,000, and the industry could be faced with hiring requirements of as much as over 141,000 workers. So for those of you who, rather than a full 10-year look, would like to see a year-on-year forecast, we do produce an annual look at things. And what I'm about to show you is over the next 10 years what happens in terms of changes in employment, replacement requirements that are non-retirement related, and retirement related replacement requirements. So shown here, starting with 2011 and working your way through to 2021, are the changes in employment that we're forecasting in the sector. You can see a bit of a bubble in the first 2 years, which is mainly due to recovery from an economic downturn that we just recently experienced. And then over the long term, though, neutral or somewhat contractionary outlook in the baseline scenario for what employment is going to do in the sector. You add on an assumption of about a 2.5% overall non-retirement related churn in the sector. That increases the hiring requirements. And then finally layer in the retirement replacement requirements in the sector. And you can see a year-on-year over the course of the 10 years. A little bit of a increased need in the shorter term as opposed to the longer term. So once again, just emphasizing in the baseline scenario, over a 2, 5, and 10-year outlook, the need to replace in the short term, or to hire in the short term over 41,000 workers, in the medium term nearly 65,000 workers, and in the long term over 112,000 workers in the baseline scenario. Also illustrated here are the contractionary and expansionary scenarios for those of you who would like to take a more conservative or perhaps a more positive outlook on what will happen with mining in the future. When we break our hiring requirements forecast, our employment forecast down into a regional outlook, you can see that the needs are not all the same in terms of the number of workers across each region. So as you can see here, the Atlantic region represents about 5% of the overall Canadian mining workforce, whereas the Prairie region has the greatest share of the Canadian mining labor force. Now, as you can see here, partly as a result of the deposits that are found in each of the region, over the 10-year period, only the prairies and the territories are forecast to experience employment growth in the baseline scenario. So if we look at Atlantic Canada here in the first line, you can see that in the baseline scenario, in terms of employment, an increase of 8,600 by 2021. So if we take a look at the breakdown shown here of overall employment growth and in every region in Canada, it's clear that demographic requirements and non-retirement separations are the primary reason for the hiring requirements across all of the regions. If you take a look, what we're showing here is that in Atlantic Canada, 3%, we're looking at 3%, whereas in the prairies, be 52%. Okay, so having taken a look at the national picture, we're going to turn our attention now to a look at what's going on in the Atlantic region in terms of hiring requirements. As I alluded to earlier, there are unique characteristics in each of the regions of Canada in terms of what's driving the hiring requirements in the industry. In Atlantic Canada, there's a mature industry that's facing some mine closures and mines going into care and maintenance phase, an aging workforce with high retirement rates, and a highly mobile workforce, particularly with the youth, where many of them commute outside of the province for work. And this is somewhat related to overall lower salaries and wages found in the Atlantic region compared to other regions in Canada. So again, looking at our 2, 5, and 10-year outlook for the Atlantic region, what we're showing here is that by 2021, we'll be looking at replacement requirements of over 3,000 workers in mining. So in the short term, just over 1,700. In the medium term, just shy of just over 2,400, and in the long term, 3,400 workers. Again, also showing that in a contractionary scenario, so that's you know, economic conditions are not as rosy as they look right now, we'd be looking at a need to hire 720, and once again, that's driven by replacement retirements and the aging workforce in the region. Under the expansionary scenario, we'd be looking at a need to hire just nearly 5,900 workers. Okay, so as we did for the national hiring requirements forecast, here we're going to show you change in employment year over year that is predicted in the Atlantic region. And you'll see here a strong, over the long term, negative changes in employment being illustrated. We'll then layer in an assumed non-retirement separation rate, and then show you what happens with when we layer in the hiring or the retirement rate. Okay, so again, a short recovery in the short, a bit of a recovery in the short term, followed by declining employment in the region over the long term. Layer in a non-retirement separation rate, and you can see that already year over year there's a need to hire despite the negative changes in employment in the region. And then you add in the retirement rate and the replacement requirements due to retirement, and you can see a need to replace the over 3,000 workers that we were talking about on the last slide. Year on year, it's approximately 1,000, or replacement of approximately 600 to 700 workers. Another thing that we do in our forecasting and our reporting for you is that we break down hiring requirements over occupations. We have over 66 occupations that we define as being core occupations to the mining sector that we then break out of our overall hiring requirements and show you what the needs would be for different occupational groups. In our national forecasts, we both list each occupation individually and group them together under broad occupational categories. We then take the top 10 in each region and provide you with a chart that looks like the one in front of you here. So these are the top 10 occupations in terms of the need to hire over the next 10 years for the Atlantic region. And you'll see that heavy equipment operators, underground production and development miners, truck drivers, and welders and heavy-duty mechanics really make up the bulk of the needs over the next 10 years in the region. This is somewhat driven by the sheer proportion of folks who work in those types of jobs in a mine, and also the type of mining activity that happens in the region. Okay, so in summary, we'll just head back to our overall forecast here. Sorry about that. And just emphasize again that the needs in the Atlantic region are really driven by a mature industry and an aging workforce. So what you see here is the bulk of the hiring requirements are being driven by not just a churn in the sector, but the high retirement rates in the sector and the need to replace workers due to retirement. Another challenge that's facing the sector that's actually not illustrated in our hiring requirements forecast, but it's something to keep in mind when you're planning for the replacements in the region, is that it's a highly mobile workforce. A number of workers in the mining sector live in the Atlantic region but work somewhere else in Canada and are flown in and out. So that's something to keep in mind. And as I said earlier, this might be related to lower salaries and wages. It might be related to a sense of having other opportunities in other sectors, or it could even just be something to do with young people wanting a sense of adventure and traveling around a little bit. Work that we do here at MIHR has looked at a number of those different elements to people's decisions to where they live versus where they work, and we'll continue to look at those issues in our research moving forward. So in addition to our annual national reports, our Research for Industry Sustainability group here at MIHR conducts customized research for specific areas of the country. So for an example, our Prairies forecast includes Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta under one regional subgrouping. We do custom work for individual provinces. Our most recent one was for the Saskatchewan Mining Association, or in partnership with the Saskatchewan Mining Association, to take a closer look at what's going on in Saskatchewan in isolation of the rest of the region. You'll notice that we have lumped together the Atlantic provinces into one region, and would be perfectly willing to entertain discussions about isolating a province within the Atlantic region. So part of the reason for that is that our forecasts are reliant on data coming from other sources that is not often, we're not, in some cases, not able to disaggregate the data into a province level because it would allow us to identify a particular company or an individual within the data set. So when we have those kinds of data limitations, we end up grouping provinces together and taking a look at them as a region, on a regional level rather than an individual provincial level. part of our continuous growth and development and evolution of our forecasting methodology, we continue to do work to become more precise, or as precise as we can get, in terms of how specific we are with what the different factors are, and how they're playing into the forecast. So right now we're taking a closer look at what factors affect employment in the sector at the commodity level, and if there are new elements that could be included in our employment forecast. The other thing that we have in development right now in our research sector is a look at available talent for the sector and a model of available talent. Not quite a pure labor supply model, or and just like our hiring requirements are not quite a pure labor demand model. This one looks at available talent. So in our 2012 forecasting report that will be released in the summer, late August of 2012, you will see a new section of our report and a new capability at MIHR of being able to take a look at the hiring requirements against available talent and a bit of a gap analysis. And for a little bit of a preview on what our forecasts of available talent include, they include a look at mobility, so interprovincial mobility, and also international mobility, so immigration from other countries. And also who's available from the school system, what we call school leavers, folks who are leaving the school system and entering the labor market in the regions. We rolled that together with a number of other variables and produce an outlook over the 10-year period for available supply for each occupation. We then compare that to the hiring requirements that we have from our hiring requirements forecast, and do a bit of a gap analysis and maybe point you in a direction for where specific solutions might be found. So stay tuned for exciting new ongoing developments to our forecasting capabilities and our modeling, and do feel free to contact myself or Ross to get a better sense of what it is that's coming down the pipes, and if there's a specific question that you have, we're happy to answer your questions anytime. And on that note, I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you have now for me in the webinar. Now, what I'll do is
at the moment, we currently have a few questions. Regions does MIHR's research show or suspect where labor is moving out of the region towards?
So out of the Atlantic region towards where?
Yes.
Without picking on any particular region, what I could say is that we do show need to hire in a couple of key areas in the country. The territories or the north is one area, partly because there's a large, maybe the link to the Atlantic region there is there's a large fly-in, fly-out segment of the northern workforce, and it's a popular choice for folks in the Atlantic region to seek employment in a fly-in, fly-out arrangement. And the other area is the Prairies region, and some of the activities that are going on there are drawing experienced miners to those regions.
And talking about the commodity mix, what kind of commodities do you suspect are, or does MIHR research show seem to be the most prevalent in the Atlantic region, and how does that compare to a region like the Prairies where you indicated, or the territories where you indicated there are higher requirements?
So sorry, I'm going to repeat that one back and segment the question out. So the first question was,
what kind of commodities has MIHR research shown exist in the Atlantic region, and what kind of comparable does that have to the Prairies or the territories?
So you have in the territories large diamond operations, and in the prairies you're looking at potash and uranium predominantly. So depending on which region you're talking about hard rock mining or a combination of hard rock and soft rock mining. So that would be the main reason that there's a skill set or a pool of available talent in the Atlantic region with those skills that are attracted outside the region.
You mentioned that the retirement rate in mining is different than what it is in the Canadian workforce. Is it significantly different, and to what degree is the difference?
I wouldn't call it significantly different in terms of statistical differences or whatnot. So if you're using the word significant loosely, then yeah, the average age of retirement in the Canadian mining workforce is about 59.5 years, and we do see that similar pattern in the Atlantic region. So the overall retirement, average retirement age in the labor market is a little over 62 years. So that difference of a few years makes a tremendous difference in terms of retirement rates from the sector, and really does impact this retirement wave that's coming and the need to replace them.
When you're talking about non-retirement separations, what are some examples of things that get lumped into non-retirement separation?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about non-retirement separation, it's all the reasons folks leave that have nothing to do with retirement. So you could see people leaving the workforce to go back to school. You could see people leaving for long-term leave, whether it's a medical illness or something like that. You could see people leaving the mining sector to go work in a different sector or a different industry, or just the one that we don't like to talk about is death also happens. So all of those reasons that have nothing to do with retirement are what we call non-retirement separations.
Okay, well that's all the questions we currently have in the queue. I wonder if there's any others that are going to come in, or anybody else has anything. Please feel free to submit them.
If anybody else has any other questions for us that come up after the webinar is closed, feel free to email me at mroberts@mihr.ca, or you can also research through research@mihr.ca. For a closer look at our products and services, you can find us on the website www.mihr.ca, or if you're specifically interested in our labor market forecasting capability and some of the research that we do under research for industry sustainability, you can find us at mininghrforecast.ca. When you log into mininghrforecast.ca, I encourage you to go in and play around with our forecasting tool that's there. So if you feel for some reason that we are a little too conservative in some of our estimates, or for your particular region or your particular needs, you want to plug in a scenario that I didn't talk about today in our three scenarios, our contractionary, baseline, and expansionary scenarios, you can go into mininghrforecast.ca and click on the forecasting tool and produce a customized scenario for yourself. So you can choose what you want in terms of assumptions around labor productivity for your region. You can choose an age of retirement. So let's say your company's retirement age is not 59.5, it's 63. You can go in and plug in 63 and see what will happen. You can focus in on assumptions around commodity indexes and whether the economic conditions will remain the same or not. And you can also select a particular occupational category and focus in on a forecast for that particular occupation. As you're clicking around in MiHR forecast, you're creating your own scenarios. You can lay them out side by side with the MIHR scenarios. You can download them into Excel so that you can put them into your own presentations and use them in your own discussions in your group or your organization. So I do encourage you to go in and take a look at that and contact myself or Ross or research@MIHR.ca.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
At any time. For joining, we do look forward to hearing your questions in the future, and if anything specific comes up, don't hesitate to give me a shout.